A Toastmaster that has accumulated nearly 250 trophies over his 4 years of being a Toastmaster. Wow. How could this be? Apparently, he's figured out that it's cheaper and just easier to buy his trophies from trophy houses. In any case, let's welcome Toastmaster extraordinaire, Tim Linger, with his speech, Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Toastmasters. Thanksgiving is not what we think it is. All the things we learned in school. Let me tell you the true story. I might embellish a little bit, but mostly it's true. Let's go back to 1507, when King Henry VIII became the monarch. He did not like the Roman Catholic Church. They wouldn't let him get a divorce. Now, he had other suggestions. He had a total of 6 wives, and some of them were mysteriously killed. He had to withdraw. Well, he asked the Pope for permission to get divorced or get rid of his wives, and the Pope said no. So he formed the Church of England, a radical church. You had to attend church on Sundays. You could be fined, imprisoned, beaten, or even killed. Puritans, separatists, and strangers are the 3 things we're going to talk about today before we get to the actual Thanksgiving meal in November of 1621. Puritans were trying to change the church from within. Separatists were trying to change the church from exterior. They couldn't get the church changed during his reign. Queen Elizabeth I would hear none of it. So they escaped. They decided to go to the New World. The Puritans, as they were called, and the separatists. No ship. So you have to do a ride share. Well, in today's world, we'd call that an Uber. So they got some investors, and they were able to get 102 pilgrims, which are people who are going to a holy land in seek of freedom, religious freedom, and approximately 30 strangers. Now, strangers were either the shipmates or they were skilled workers to help build the colony in the new land for the investors. They were supposed to set sail in March, but the other ship, how many people knew there was 2 ships that were heading to the New World? The Mayflower and the Speedwell. Not to be confused with the REO Speedwagon. This was the Speedwell. He got 300 miles off the coast and had to return because it was an old ship that started taking on water. So they combined some of the pilgrims and they moved on to the New World. But they didn't leave until September. This is the beginning of the storm season. This is the beginning of the winter. They were blown off course by 200 miles. They were heading to Virginia. And we all know they landed in Massachusetts, which was not European territory. Now, we were taught in so many words, unless you study history, that was the beginning of America. In 1565, the Spanish had settled in Florida. 1580, the English had settled in North Carolina, the Roanoke Island. 1607, Jamestown. In 1585, approximately, the French were in Quebec. So the center part was for the Europeans. But this New York area, the Massachusetts area, was not part of the Virginia territory. So the Pilgrims had to make a decision. Do we head south, which they tried, but the water's too shallow, too rough, and guess what? The savages, as they called them, were attacking them. So they were stuck on the Cape, not Plymouth, Massachusetts. They were stuck on the Cape for a couple of months. They were looking to set up a settlement. They found food. Kid you not, the Indians had stashed food for the winter. They robbed the stash. No, they left an IOU. And according to the Indians, they still have not paid that back. 400 years later. So after a couple of months, they decided to move inland. Now you think that we don't really understand the coast. Well, the whole coast was mapped out. In fact, the towns were already named. Plymouth was already named. You could say it was So they went to Plymouth, and you think they're going into Plymouth where there's nothing. They've got to cut down trees and build cabins. Between 1616 and 1619, there was a village there. 2,000 savages lived there. Captain John Smith of the Jamestown fame, had come up to visit that area and had left the plague. killed off thousands, and killed off 90% of these 2,000 Indians in this one village alone. And the remaining 10% had to flee. They had to, the death was so fast that they didn't even bury their bodies. When the Pilgrims landed, there was skeletons all over the place. They had to clean up those skeletons in order to move into this village. And yes, they built some cabins, they built some meeting houses. But apparently there was a couple of 100,000 Indians that lived right around that general area, warring tribes. And most of them died during the Great Plague, the Great Dying they called it. So in November of 1620 is when they settled into Plymouth. And did they stop on Plymouth Rock? Probably not. But there is a Plymouth Rock up there now, and I'm going to go see it, by the way, next Thursday. I'm going to have Thanksgiving dinner at Plymouth Rock. I'm excited about that. So they were setting at camp, and they could feel the Indian presence, the savages. They could feel their presence. They felt like they were being watched. They were scared of these savages. Finally, in March of 1621, an Indian brave walked right onto camp, as if he used to live there, which he did. And he said in so many words, first of all, I've got to become a pilgrim. There, my pilgrim. So, the Indian brave says, and I'm going to paraphrase, of course, but he says, how? Do you have any beer? Yes, the Indian asked for beer in plain English. And of course the Pilgrims would say, how do you know English? And the savage says, well, I've known English for years. You see, there's a lot of fishermen up and down the coast whaling and hunting. And I've learned how to trade with them and learn English. And so you think the Indians were terrible. Well, it turns out because there were so few of them and they needed friendship and the other tribes were warring with them, they needed protection. So they formed an alliance with the Pilgrims. And through the summer of 1621, they had some good crops. And we all know the story of the fish and the corn and growing. Well, come November, their Pilgrims were sitting down for dinner. This is the true story. Sitting down for dinner, and the Indians showed up with some venison, aka deer. And they sat down, and the Indians would not leave for 3 days. They were eating and partying and playing games. So with that, the Pilgrims gave thanks that the Indians finally left. So I leave you with this. You will never hear and understand and think of Thanksgiving the same way ever again. Thank you.